The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine when Isabella Castleton awakened on the morning of her 18th birthday. From her room on the third floor of the imposing family mansion, she could see the entire expanse of St. Harbor, the coastal Massachusetts town where her family had wielded influence for more than a century. The colorful colonial houses cascaded down the hillside until they met the sea, and on the horizon, the Blue Ridge Mountains rose like silent guardians of ancient secrets. But that morning, Isabella didn't feel like an heiress about to take her place in local high society. She felt like a prisoner counting the final moments of freedom before execution. The 18th birthday of a Castleton wasn't just a celebration. It was a rite of passage, a coronation that would officially transform her into the most valuable piece on St. Harbor's social and political chessboard. The Italian organza dress was already laid out on the bed, an exclusive model ordered directly from a Milan atelier. Pearls that had belonged to her great-grandmother waited in a velvet box, along with diamond earrings that her mother had worn on her own 18th birthday. Everything planned, everything foreseen, everything decided without her having any say. Donna Castleton, her mother, entered the room without knocking as she always did. She was an elegant 52-year-old woman with perfectly styled brown hair in a low bun and green eyes that once were like Isabella's, but now carried a calculated coldness, the product of decades living under the inflexible rules of the local aristocracy. "Good morning, dear. I hope you slept well. Today is a very important day." Donna approached the window and closed the heavy burgundy velvet curtains. "We can't allow the sun to damage your skin before the party." Isabella remained silent, watching her mother meticulously organize every detail of her appearance for the evening. She knew that any protest would be futile. At 18, she could finally be officially presented as the future wife of Richard Davenport, heir to one of the most influential families in the region. The engagement had been arranged when she was only 15, but only now would it be made public. "Richard will arrive at 7 o'clock for the formal conversation with your father," continued Donna, adjusting the dress on the bed. "He's a very well-educated young man. You'll be lucky. The Davenport family owns land from Boston to Newport, not to mention their export businesses. You'll make a perfect couple." Perfect. The word echoed in Isabella's mind like a funeral bell. Richard Davenport was indeed a perfect match in the eyes of society. Graduated in law from Harvard University, son of a traditional family, handsome by conventional standards, polished, educated. But for Isabella, he represented everything she despised: the falsity of rehearsed smiles, the coldness of marriages, of convenience, the golden prison that would be her life if she followed the path laid out by her parents. "Yes, mother," murmured Isabella, turning her gaze back to the window. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the top of the hill where stood the stone cottage that belonged to the Waynes. Her heart raced just thinking of the family name, or rather of one specific member of it. Damian Wayne, the man who had haunted her thoughts since she turned 15. He wasn't a suitor, wasn't a family friend, wasn't even welcome in the more conservative social circles of St. Harbor. He was an enigmatic presence who appeared at high society events like an elegant shadow, observing everything and everyone with those stormy eyes that seemed to see through the masks everyone wore. Damian was 34 and carried a reputation that oscillated between mystery and scandal. Heir to a fortune built on investments that crossed ethical boundaries, businesses that no one openly questioned, but that everyone whispered about in the corners of ballrooms. His company, Wayne Holdings, had tentacles in various sectors. Real estate, technology, imports, and rumors even spoke of involvement with politicians in Washington. But to Isabella, Damian was much more than society's whispers. He was the man who had observed her for 3 years with an intensity that made her tremble, who conversed with her differently from everyone else, who treated her like a real person and not a porcelain doll. Their conversations, always brief and always public, had a depth that left her thirsting for more. "Isabella, are you listening to me?" Donna's irritated voice brought her back to reality. "Yes, mother." "Richard, 7 o'clock. Formal conversation." Donna studied her with suspicious eyes. Is there something you want to tell me? You seem distant. I'm just nervous about the party. Isabella forced a smile she had learned to fake since childhood. Her mother seemed satisfied with the answer. It's natural. But remember, dear, today you stop being a girl to become a woman. And a woman of the Castleton family has responsibilities. We have a name to uphold, a position to maintain. Your marriage to Richard will consolidate our influence in the region for another generation. After Donna left, Isabella allowed herself to look fixedly at the cottage on the hill. Would Damien be there? Would he come to the party? The idea of seeing him while she formalized her engagement to another man made her feel a tightness in her chest that bordered on despair. The hours passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Hairdressers, makeup artists, florists, decorators, all transforming the Castleton mansion into a fairy tale setting. The main hall was decorated with arrangements of white and gold orchids, the tables set with family porcelain and crystal that had belonged to the Castletons for generations. Musicians tested their instruments, waiters organized silver trays, and the smell of fine spices came from the kitchen where chefs prepared the banquet. Isabella observed everything from the marble staircase, feeling like an actress about to enter the stage to play a role she detested. Her father, August Castleton, an imposing 60-year-old man with grey hair and military posture, checked every detail with the precision of a general organizing a battle. Isabella. His voice was authoritative, but carried genuine affection. Come here, daughter. She descended the steps, the organza dress whispering against the marble. August waited for her in the center of the hall, under the crystal chandelier that had been brought from France by his great-grandfather. You look beautiful, he said, taking her hands, just like your mother when I asked her to marry me. Father. Isabella hesitated. Was this the moment to say she didn't want to marry Richard? That she couldn't pretend anymore that she was happy with the life they had planned for her? I know that sometimes our methods seem rigid, continued August, as if reading her thoughts. But everything we do is to protect you, to ensure you have the best possible future. Richard is a good man, from a good family. You will be happy, together. What if I don't want to marry him? The words came out before she could control herself. August's face hardened. Don't want to? Isabella, this isn't a question of wanting or not wanting. It's a question of responsibility, of family honor. You're not just any young woman who can afford the luxury of following romantic whims. You are a Castleton. But what? If I love someone else? Love? August laughed, but there was no humor in his voice. Daughter, love is a luxury our class cannot afford. Marriage is an alliance, a union of interests. With time, respect and partnership, transform into something resembling love. That's how it was with me and your mother, how it was with my parents, and how it will be with you. Isabella felt tears burning her eyes, but she held them back. A Castleton did not cry in public, not even in front of her own father. The first guest arrived at 6 in the evening. Within minutes, the mansion was filled with the most important names in Massachusetts. Politicians, businessmen, judges, doctors, all who formed the elite of the state were present to witness the official presentation of Isabella Castleton to society. She greeted everyone with the perfect smile she had learned, talked about trivialities, accepted congratulations and compliments with the grace expected of a young woman in high society. But her eyes constantly searched for a specific figure among the guests. Richard Davenport arrived punctually at 7, bringing a bouquet of red roses and a smile that tried to be charming. He was handsome, Isabella had to admit. Tall, well-groomed, dark hair, blue eyes, defined jawline. He wore an Italian-tailored suit and a Swiss watch that cost more than a popular car. At 26, he was already considered one of the most coveted bachelors in the region. "Happy birthday, Isabella," he said, kissing her hand formally. "You look stunning." "Thank you, Richard." She accepted the flowers, but the touch of his, hands on hers, made her feel an unpleasant shiver. The formal conversation with her father was quick and procedural. Richard officially asked for her hand in marriage, August gave his blessing, and they toasted with French champagne while the guests applauded. Isabella smiled, waved, Let Richard place the engagement ring on her finger, a 5-carat solitaire that sparkled like a golden chain. But when Richard kissed her to seal the engagement, she kept her lips firmly closed and her eyes open, desperately, searching the hall for any sign of Damian Wayne. He wasn't there. The party continued until almost midnight. Music, dancing, empty conversations, rehearsed laughter. Isabella played her part perfectly, but inside she felt as if she were falling apart. Each congratulation, each felicitation on the engagement, each comment about how Richard and she would make a perfect couple was like a stab in her chest. When she finally managed to disentangle herself from the last guests, Isabella went up to her room with the pretext of being tired, but instead of lying down, she stood at the window, staring fixedly at the cottage on the hill. A faint light shone in one of the windows. Damian was there. Without thinking twice, Isabella took off her party dress and put on a simple white cotton dress. Barefoot, she left through the back door of the mansion, avoiding the gardens where some staff were still collecting the last vestiges of the party. The walk to the cottage took about 15 minutes, along a steep trail that wound through eucalyptus, trees and palm trees. The full moon illuminated the path, and the sound of waves breaking on the rocks below created a melancholy symphony that perfectly matched Isabella's state of mind. When she reached the cottage, she hesitated for only a moment before knocking on the door. She knew she was breaking all the rules of etiquette and decorum that had been hammered into her head since childhood. A single young woman, and now engaged, did not visit a man alone, especially in the middle of the night. But at that moment, the rules seemed as irrelevant as the stars in the sky. The door opened and there he was, Damian Wayne, with his slightly disheveled black hair, wearing only a white shirt with the first buttons open and dark pants. His grey eyes, which always seemed stormy, now showed genuine surprise at seeing her. Isabella. His voice was deep, hoarse, laden with an emotion she couldn't decipher. "What are you doing here?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I just know I needed to come." They looked at each other in silence for long seconds. Isabella could feel her heart beating, so hard she was sure he could hear it. Damian ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had seen him make other times when he seemed to be wrestling with some internal dilemma. "You should go back home," he said finally. "Today is your engagement party. It's not appropriate for you to be here." "Appropriate?" Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. "My whole life is based on what's appropriate. Dress appropriately, behave appropriately, marry appropriately. What if I don't want to do what's appropriate anymore?" Damian took a step back as if she were dangerous. "Isabella, you don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She took a step forward, entering the cottage without waiting for an invitation. "I know that for 3 years you've looked at me in a way no one else looks. I know that when we talk, even for just a few minutes, I feel like I can finally breathe. And I know that today, when I got engaged to Richard, you weren't there because you couldn't bear to see that farce." The cottage was Spartan but elegant. Dark solid wood furniture, a fireplace where some embers still glowed, shelves full of books and abstract paintings on the walls. On a low table, there was a half-empty bottle of whiskey and a used glass. "You were drinking alone while I pretended to be happy down there," observed Isabella. Damian closed the door but kept his distance from her. "I shouldn't have come. I shouldn't be here in St. Harbor." "But you are. Why?" He looked at her for long moments, as if weighing each word. "Because I am a weak man," he said finally. "Because I can't stay away from you, even knowing it's wrong." "Why is it wrong?" Isabella approached him, her eyes not leaving his. "Because I'm younger, because I'm engaged, or because you're afraid of what you feel?" "For all those reasons, and for others you wouldn't understand." "Then explain to me." She was so close now that she could smell his skin, a mixture of wood and something indefinably masculine. "Tell me why you look at me as if I were both your salvation and your downfall." Damian closed his eyes, as if being too close to her was painful. "Because you are," he murmured. "God forgive me, but you are." Exactly that. The silence that followed was charged with electric tension. Isabella could feel the heat emanating from his body. could see the internal struggle reflected in his expression. She knew she was at the edge of something irreversible, a precipice that, once crossed, would change everything forever. "Damien," she whispered, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating erratically under her palm. "I don't want to marry Richard. I never did. The only thing I want is—" "No." He held her hand but didn't push it away. "Don't say it, because if you say it, I won't be able to resist." "Then don't resist." Isabella rose on her tiptoes, her lips almost touching his. "For once in your life, don't resist." And then, as if a dam had broken, Damien pulled her to him. Their lips met in a kiss that had nothing gentle or hesitant about it. It was hunger, desperation, 3 years of pent-up tension exploding in a moment of total surrender. Isabella felt as if she were on fire. Every fiber of her being responded to his touch, to the hands that tangled in her hair, to the lips that explored hers with a passion she didn't know existed. It was different from anything she had imagined, more intense, more overwhelming. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Damien rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if in agony. "This can't happen," he murmured. "You don't understand, Isabella. I'm not a good man. There are things in my past—" "I don't care." She kissed his jaw, feeling the stubble, scratching her lips. "I don't care about your past. I only care about this moment." Damien moved away abruptly as if he had been burned. "You should care. If you knew the truth about who I am, about the things I've done, then tell me." Isabella followed him, not willing to let him escape. "Tell me everything. Trust me." "Trust?" He laughed bitterly. "When was the last time someone trusted me? When was the last time I deserved trust?" Outside, thunder began to roll through the mountains, announcing the approaching storm. Lightning briefly illuminated the interior of the cottage, projecting dancing shadows on the walls. "Everyone in St. Harbor whispers about you," said Isabella softly. "They say you're dangerous, that your business is dirty, that you have blood on your hands. But when I look at you, I don't see any of that. I see a man who carries pain, who hides from the world, who punishes himself for something that might not even be his fault." Damien stared at her with an expression of surprise, and something that could be hope. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I spend all day surrounded by men who consider themselves honorable and respectable, and you're the only one who treats me as if I had value beyond my surname and my bank account." Isabella approached again, this time more slowly. "You're the only one who speaks to me as if my opinions mattered, as if I were a real person and not just a well-dressed doll." The first drop of rain hit the window, followed by many others. In a matter of minutes, a downpour descended on St. Harbor, transforming the calm night into a spectacle of natural fury. "You can't go back home in this rain," observed Damien, looking at the window where water streamed in torrents. "Then I'll stay here." Isabella said this with a naturalness that surprised them both. "Isabella," there was warning in his voice. "I know what I'm doing, Damien. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm doing." He turned to her, and at that moment, under the golden light of the candles he had lit earlier, Isabella saw all his defenses crumble. She saw the man behind the dark mask, vulnerable and wounded, but also capable of an emotional intensity that made her tremble. "If you stay," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "everything will change. There will be no going back." "I know." Isabella approached the fireplace, extending her hands to the warmth of the embers. "And maybe it's time I stopped being afraid of changes." The sound of the rain grew until it became deafening, but inside the cottage there was an almost sacred intimacy. Damien served 2 glasses of whiskey, and they sat in front of the fireplace. For the first time they talked without rush, without the pressure of being observed, without the need to keep up appearances. Damien told her about his childhood, about how he lost his parents in an accident when he was only 16, about how he was forced to grow up too quickly to take over the family business. He told about the difficult decisions he had to make, about how the business world forced him to make choices that compromised his soul. Isabella talked about the loneliness of being the perfect daughter, about how she felt like an actress playing a role she hadn't chosen, about the dreams she secretly cultivated, traveling the world, studying art, maybe even working with underprivileged children. With each word exchanged, with each gesture, the connection between them deepened. It wasn't just physical attraction, though that was undeniable. It was recognition, mutual understanding, the sensation of finally finding someone who saw through the masks. When Damien finally touched her again, it wasn't with the desperate urgency of before. His hands traced her face with reverence, as if she were something precious and fragile. He kissed her tenderly this time, savoring each moment, each sigh. "Isabella," he murmured against her lips. "Are you sure? Because if we do this, if we give in to this, I won't be able to let you go, and that could destroy us both." In response, she began to unbutton his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. "Then, destroy us," she whispered, "because a life without this, without you, is no life at all." And then, to the sound of the storm outside and the golden light of the flames in the fireplace, they lost themselves in each other. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, emotional, a fusion of souls that had been searching for each other without knowing. Each touch was a promise, each kiss a silent declaration that the world outside could crumble, but what was being born between them was stronger than any social convention, any family expectation, any fear. When dawn broke, Isabella woke in Damien's arms, feeling transformed. She was no longer the obedient young woman who had left the mansion the night before. She was a woman who had chosen her own destiny, who had tasted the forbidden fruit and discovered it was sweeter than anything she had been offered before. Damien was awake, watching her with an expression that mixed adoration and agony. "What is it?" she asked, caressing his chest. "We just set all of St. Harbour on fire," he said, "and I don't regret it one bit." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh. But they both knew that the real storm was just beginning. Because in a small town like St. Harbour, secrets did not remain buried for long, and what they had done that night would be just the first move in a game much more dangerous than either of them could imagine. The morning sun entered through the cottage windows, like golden fingers caressing Isabella's naked skin. She awakened slowly, enveloped in the warmth of Damien's arms, feeling his chest rise and fall in a tranquil rhythm against her back. For a moment she allowed herself to believe this was real, that she could stay here forever, protected from the outside world by the fortress they had built with kisses and whispered promises. But reality began to infiltrate like ice water into her thoughts. Yesterday's party, the engagement, Richard, her parents, the entire society of St. Harbour that would wake up that morning expecting to see the radiant young bride, not the transformed woman she had become in another man's arms. "You're thinking too loudly," murmured Damien against her neck, his voice husky from sleep. "I can hear the gears of your mind turning." Isabella turned in his arms, facing those grey eyes that seemed to see directly into her soul. In daylight, he looked even more handsome but also more dangerous. There were small scars on his chest, marks she hadn't noticed in the dimness of the previous night, and a discreet tattoo on his left wrist, a symbol she didn't recognize. "I'm thinking about how I'm going to explain where I spent the night," she admitted, tracing the outline of the tattoo with her finger. "And you? What are you thinking about?" "About how I should be feeling guilty for taking the virginity of St. Harbour's most respected daughter on the night of her engagement to another man." He captured her finger, kissing it gently. "But the only thing I feel is the desire to keep you here forever." "Damien," Isabella began, but he silenced her with a kiss that still carried the taste of the previous night's passion. "I know," he said when they separated. "Though you need to go back. But before that, I need you to understand something. What happened here wasn't a whim, a night of rebellion that you can forget and move forward with your planned life, at least not for me." The intensity in his voice made something contract in Isabella's chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you." The words came out like a confession torn by force. I'm saying that I've been fighting against this for 3 years, convincing myself it was just obsession, forbidden attraction for something I couldn't have. But last night, when you came here, when you gave yourself to me, Isabella, I've never felt anything like this in my life. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. Since the first time we talked when I was 15 and you treated me as if my words mattered, I knew it was crazy, that it was impossible, but nothing is impossible. Damien pulled her closer, as if he wanted to fuse their two bodies into one. We can run away today. I have contacts in other countries, enough money for us to start a new life far from here. The idea was tempting, as seductive as Damien himself. Isabella imagined waking up every day in those arms, free from the suffocating expectations of her family, free to be who she really was. But reality was more complex than dreams. And my family? My parents would be devastated. Your parents will survive. But if you stay, if you marry Richard, it will be you who is devastated. Damien approached again. Isabella, how long have you been happy? Really happy, not just fulfilling expectations? The question hit her like lightning. When was the last time she had felt truly happy? Perhaps as a child playing on the beach before understanding that every aspect of her life would be controlled and planned by others. I don't remember, she admitted. Then come with me. Let's discover together what it means to be happy. Isabella looked around the room where she had spent her childhood and adolescence, the porcelain dolls on the shelves, the books that had transported her to other worlds, the family photos in silver frames. It was a beautiful, comfortable, safe life, but was it really life? 1 hour, she said finally. Meet me in the back garden in 1 hour. Damien smiled, and it was as if the sun had risen in his face. Are you sure? I'm sure. Isabella kissed him passionately, savoring perhaps the last kiss they would share in that house. Now go before someone discovers you're here. After Damien left through the window, Isabella began to prepare for the escape. She took a small suitcase and filled it with just the essentials, some clothes, personal documents, the jewelry her grandmother had left for her. She left a letter on the bed, explaining her decision and asking her parents for forgiveness. When there were 10 minutes left until the appointed time, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, she hid the suitcase in the closet and threw herself on the bed, pretending to sleep. The door opened silently and August entered the room. Isabella kept her eyes closed, controlling her breathing to appear as if she were sleeping. She felt her father approach the bed, stand there for long moments, then move away. Only when she heard the door close again did Isabella open her eyes. There was something on the bedside table that wasn't there before. The photo that Richard had shown her that morning. Next to the photo, a handwritten note. I know you'll try to run away with him tonight, but think carefully about the consequences before destroying our family. I love you, Dad. Isabella felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her father knew. He knew about the meeting with Damien, about the escape plans, perhaps even about his presence in the room minutes ago. Was it a trap? Was August waiting downstairs to prevent the escape? Or was he genuinely giving her one last chance to reconsider? She looked at the clock. 5 minutes to the appointed time. Damien would be waiting in the garden, ready to flee with her to a new life. On the other side of the door, her family slept, trusting that she would make the right choice. Isabella took the suitcase, opened the window, and looked down. In the darkness of the garden, she could see Damien's silhouette waiting for her. It was time to choose. Forever. Isabella looked at her father's note for long moments, the words, I love you, Dad, burning in her retina like a hot iron. Her hands trembled as she held the paper, and for an instant she almost gave in, almost put away the suitcase, tore up the farewell letter, and remained in the suffocating safety of her planned life. But then she remembered Damien's eyes when he said he loved her. She remembered the feeling of freedom she had experienced in his arms, the first time she had felt truly alive. She remembered Carmen's words about missing what could have been. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering, what if? She put the note in her pocket, took the suitcase, and headed to the window. The descent down the trellis was more difficult than she had imagined. The branches scratched her skin, and several times she almost lost her balance. But the thought of Damien waiting for her down there kept her focused. When she finally touched the ground, Damien emerged from the shadows and wrapped her in his arms. "I thought you had changed your mind," he whispered against her hair. "I almost did." Isabella pulled back to look him in the eyes. "My father left a note. He knows about us, about our escape plans." Damien's face hardened. "Is it a trap?" "I don't know, but we can't stay here to find out." They quietly headed to the back of the property, where Damien had hidden a car among the trees. It was a dark, discreet sedan, not the type of vehicle someone would associate with a man of his social position. "Where did you get this?" asked Isabella as he put her suitcase in the trunk. "Borrowed from a friend. My cars are too well known. It would be easy to track us." They entered the car in silence, and Damien drove carefully through the deserted streets of St. Harbour. Isabella looked out the window, seeing her hometown pass like a film in slow motion. The church where she had prayed since childhood, the square where she had played as a child, the houses of family friends she would probably never see again. Each familiar landmark was a silent farewell. "Where are we going?" she asked when they left the town limits. "First, to Boston. I have an apartment there that no one knows about. We'll hide for a few days while I organize our documentation." "Documentation?" "New passports, temporary identities. I have contacts who can provide this quickly." The reality of what they were doing began to crystallize in Isabella's mind. They weren't just running away to a romantic life elsewhere. They were becoming fugitives, people who would need to live in the shadows, always looking over their shoulders. "Damien," she said, after driving in silence for some time, "are you sure there's no other way? Can't we just go to another state, start over without needing false identities? Darling, when your father discovers you've fled, he won't simply accept it. He has influence throughout the country, contacts in the police, in the judiciary. If we use our real identities, he'll find us in a matter of days." The truth of his words was undeniable but still disturbing. Isabella was beginning to understand the real price of her freedom. They drove for 2 hours through the early morning, along the winding roads of the coastal highway. Damien was a careful driver, always keeping within the speed limit, stopping at all signs. Nothing that could draw attention. Day was breaking when they arrived in Boston. Damien drove through the city center to a quiet residential neighborhood, stopping in front of a modest middle-class building. "This is it," he said, taking the bags. The apartment was small but comfortable, with simple and functional furniture. 2 bedrooms, a living room, a compact kitchen. Very different from the luxury Isabella was accustomed to, but there was something welcoming in the simplicity of the place. "It's my refuge," explained Damien. "I bought it a few years ago when I realized I might need a place to hide. It's registered under another name, impossible to trace back to me." Isabella sat on the sofa, the weight of the last few hours finally falling on her. "So that's it. I really did it. Abandoned my family, my life, everything." Damien sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Are you regretting it?" "No, but I'm scared." She snuggled against his chest. "What if they never forgive me? What if I never see my parents again?" "Maybe with time they'll understand. Maybe when the dust settles." "Do you really believe that?" Damien hesitated before answering. "I don't know, but I know you made the right decision. A life without love is not life." They stayed embraced on the sofa until the sun had fully risen. Damien prepared coffee and toast in the small kitchen, and they ate breakfast in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "What do we do now?" asked Isabella. "Now we wait. My contact will bring the new documents tomorrow night. After that, we can travel wherever we want." "And until then?" "Until then, we try not to think about what we left behind." But not thinking proved impossible. Around 10 in the morning, Isabella's phone began to ring insistently. First her mother, then her father, then Richard. She looked at the mist, calls accumulating on the screen, her heart heavy. "They've discovered," she said. "It was expected. Your absence would be noticed at breakfast time." The phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. "Answer it," said Damien. "It could be important." With trembling hands, Isabella answered. "Isabella." It was Carmen's voice, and she sounded desperate. "Carmen? How did you get this number?" "I took it from your room." "Isabella, girl, what have you done? Your mother is desperate. Your father is like a madman. The whole house is upside down." Tears began to roll down Isabella's face. "Carmen, I had to do this. I couldn't marry Richard. But to run away like this, without telling anyone. Girl, they called the police. They're saying you were kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" Isabella looked at Damien with alarm. "Your father is saying that man, Damien Wayne, kidnapped you, that he forced you to run away with him." "That's not true." "Carmen, listen carefully. I left of my own free will. No one forced me to do anything." "Then why don't you come home? Explain everything to your parents. Resolve this situation." "Because they would never understand. They would never accept my choice." "Isabella," Carmen's voice became pleading, "your mother fainted when they found your room empty. They had to call the doctor. She's sedated now. But when she wakes up—" Guilt hit Isabella like an avalanche. She knew her parents would suffer from her departure, but she hadn't imagined it would be so intense. "Tell her I'm fine," whispered Isabella. "Tell her I'm safe, and that I love her very much. Girl, come home. Anything can be resolved by talking." "No. Carmen, some things can't be resolved by talking." After hanging up, Isabella collapsed in tears. Damien held her, stroking her hair, but she could feel the tension in his body. "They're saying you kidnapped me," she said between sobs. "It was expected. Your father wouldn't admit that his perfect daughter disobeyed him. It's easier to blame the dangerous man. But that means the police are looking for you. For us." "Yes. Which makes our situation more complicated, but not impossible." Damien began to pace, clearly thinking quickly. "We'll have to accelerate our departure from the country," he said finally. "We can't wait until tomorrow night." "How?" "I have a boat docked at a private marina here in Boston. We can sail to Canada. From there, catch a flight to Europe." "You have a boat?" "I have several. Things I didn't register in my real name." Damien sat down next to her again. "Isabella, I need you to understand. From now on, our life will be complicated. We'll have to be careful, always live with a certain paranoia. Are you sure this is what you want?" Isabella dried her tears and looked into his eyes. "I'm sure, but I need one thing." "What?" "I need to know the whole truth about you, about Lisa, about your business, about everything. If we're going to live this life together, I can't have secrets between us." Damien nodded slowly. "You're right. You deserve to know everything." Over the next 2 hours, Damien told his complete story. He talked about how he discovered the existence of Lisa when she was 17 and he was 25, how he approached her, how they developed a strong fraternal relationship, how she decided to study journalism to expose the corruption that had killed other young journalists in the region. Lisa was stubborn, too brave for her own good, he said, his voice laden with emotion. "When she began investigating the corruption scheme, I tried to convince her to stop. I offered to finance any other journalistic project she wanted, but she said she couldn't ignore the truth." What truth had she discovered? That some of the most respected men in Massachusetts were involved in money laundering from drug trafficking. Politicians, judges, businessmen, people who frequented the same social circles as your family. Isabella felt a chill in her stomach. Did my father know about this? I don't know, I hope not. But some of the names Lisa had discovered, they were close friends of his. The implication was clear. If Lisa's investigation were made public, not only would the guilty be exposed, but also those who lived with them, who did business with them, who were seen as their allies. That's why my father is so determined to keep me away from you, Isabella realized. It's not just paternal protection, it's self-preservation. Possibly. But Isabella, I need you to know, I never managed to prove who killed Lisa. I have suspicions, but no concrete evidence. And that's why you got involved in questionable businesses, to try to discover the truth? Partially. But also because After her death, I realized how the world really works. I realized that only men with power can protect those they love. So I decided to gain power, even if it meant getting my hands dirty. Isabella absorbed the information in silence. It was a lot to process, but at least now she understood the man with whom she had fled. Damien was not a saint, but he also wasn't the monster others painted him to be. "There's one more thing," said Damien hesitantly, "about the photo that Richard showed you." "What about the photo?" "I have a suspicion about who took it and who sent it to him." "Who?" "Someone who has been watching us for some time. Someone who has an interest in separating us." Before Damien could explain further, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's my contact. He shouldn't be calling until tonight." He answered the call, and Isabella could hear a male voice speaking rapidly on the other end. As the conversation continued, Damien's face grew increasingly somber. "I understand," he said finally. "Thanks for the warning." He hung up and turned to Isabella with a grave expression. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The police already know we're in Boston. They're doing a sweep of all the hotels and apartments in the city." "How did they discover so quickly?" "Someone betrayed us. Someone who knew we have this apartment." Isabella felt her blood freeze. "Do you think it's the same person who took the photo?" "I'm sure of it. And that means we're not just dealing with your parents or with Richard. There's someone else in this game, someone with resources and their own motivations." "What do we do?" Damien was already moving, taking important documents and placing them in a waterproof folder. "We go to the boat, now, and we pray we get there before they discover the marina." They left the apartment quickly, taking only the essentials. Damien drove through alternative routes across the city, avoiding the main avenues where the police would probably be setting up roadblocks. The marina was in a more isolated area, frequented mainly by local fishermen and a few pleasure craft owners. Damien's boat was a medium-sized yacht, about 40 feet, with elegant but discreet lines. "It's beautiful," commented Isabella, as Damien prepared the vessel to depart. "It was Lisa's," he said softly. "She loved sailing. She left it to me when she died." Another piece of the puzzle fit into place. Damien wasn't just fleeing with Isabella out of love. He was fleeing in his dead sister's boat, carrying the ashes of an investigation that was never concluded, trying to protect another woman he loved from the same tragic fate. When they were about to depart, Isabella saw flashing lights on the road leading to the marina. "Damien," she said, pointing. He looked and swore under his breath. "Police. They arrived faster than I expected." "Can we get out before they reach here?" "We'll find out." Damien accelerated the engine and steered the yacht out of the marina. Behind them, Isabella could see the police cars arriving at the dock, but they were already too far to be detained. When they left the bay and entered the open sea, Damien finally relaxed a little. "We made it," he said. "By a narrow margin, but we made it." "Where now?" "Halifax. From there we can catch a flight to Europe. I have contacts in Canada who can help us with documentation." Isabella sat on the stern of the boat, watching the American coast disappear on the horizon. It was official now. She was a fugitive, a woman without a country, without family, without legal identity. Everything she had in the world was on that boat with her. "Are you regretting it?" asked Damien, sitting beside her. "No," she answered, and was surprised to discover it was true. "I'm scared, confused, sad for having hurt my parents, but I don't regret it. Even knowing our life will be complicated? Even knowing that." Isabella took his hand. "Damien, there's something I need to tell you." "What?" "Since I left home, I've only been able to think about one thing. You said someone is watching us, someone who has an interest in separating us. I think I know who it is." Damien turned to her completely. "Who?" "Richard. He's not just a spoiled young man who wants to maintain an arranged marriage. There's something darker in him, something I hadn't realized before." "What makes you think this?" "The way he got information about you so quickly, the photo taken at exactly the right moment, and mainly the way he knew exactly what to say to pressure me." Isabella paused, organizing her thoughts. "Damien, what?" If Richard is involved in the same scheme that killed Lisa, the idea hung between them like a storm cloud. If it were true, it meant their escape wasn't just about forbidden love. It was about life and death. If you're right, said Damien slowly, then we're not just running from society's disapproval. We're running from people who killed to protect their secrets. And does that change anything? Damien looked at her for long moments, then smiled. It was a fierce, almost predatory smile. It changes everything, he said, because now we're not just running away, we're going after the truth. What do you mean? I mean that when we reach Europe, we'll do more than just hide. We'll finish the work Lisa started. We'll expose the entire scheme, all those involved, and ensure she gets justice. Won't that be dangerous? It will be extremely dangerous. Damien took her face between his hands. But you said you didn't want to live safely without love. How about living dangerously with love and with purpose? Isabella thought about the question for only a moment before answering. I accept. And then, under the blue sky of the North Atlantic, with the United States disappearing behind them and an uncertain future ahead, they kissed. It wasn't just the kiss of two lovers fleeing together. It was the kiss of two warriors sealing a pact of vengeance and justice. When they separated, Damien checked the GPS and adjusted the course. Halifax in 12 hours, he said. And then we begin the hunt. Isabella leaned back in her seat, feeling a strange mixture of fear and expectation. She had left St. Harbor as a frightened young woman fleeing an unwanted marriage. But she was arriving in Canada as a determined woman about to discover the truth, no matter the price. The transformation was complete, and it was just the beginning. As they sailed through the afternoon, Damien told more details about Lisa's investigation, about the names she had discovered, about the connections she had made. Isabella absorbed every piece of information, every clue, every suspicion. There are hidden files, said Damien. Lisa was paranoid about security. She hid copies of everything she discovered in different places. Some I found, others are still lost. Where? One is in a safe in Switzerland. Another is hidden somewhere in St. Harbor, but I never managed to discover where. What if that file hidden in St. Harbor contains the evidence we need? It would be our chance to finally prove everything, but it would also be impossible to recover. We can't go back to the United States. We can't, agreed Isabella. But I know someone who can. Who? Carmen. She worked in the houses of several important families in St. Harbor before coming to work for us. If anyone knows about secret hiding places, places where important documents are kept, it's her. Damien considered the idea. It would be very risky to involve her in this. She raised me like a daughter. If I explain the situation, she'll help us, even knowing it could be dangerous. Carmen lost a son to drug trafficking 15 years ago. If she knows that the men responsible for fueling this trafficking are being protected by the high society of St. Harbor, she'll help us, I'm sure. Damien nodded slowly. Then our first stop after Halifax is Switzerland. We'll recover the file Lisa left there, study everything she discovered, then we'll decide how to proceed. And if we discover my father is involved? The question came out as a whisper. Then he'll pay for his crimes just like everyone else. The answer was given without hesitation, but Isabella could see the compassion in Damien's eyes. He understood that discovering her father's guilt would be devastating for her. Let's hope he's innocent, she said. Let's hope. The sun was setting when they sighted the Canadian coast. Halifax glowed in the distance like a city of golden lights, promising temporary refuge and the chance to plan their next steps. But as they approached the port, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. She looked around the horizon, searching for other boats that might be following them, but the sea seemed empty. Damien, she said, are you sure no one else knows about this boat? Why? Just a feeling, a sense that we're not as safe as we think. Damien checked the radar and frowned. There's a vessel about 5 miles behind us. It's been maintaining a constant distance for more than an hour. Following us? Possibly. Damien accelerated the engine, and the boat jumped over the waves toward the port. Behind them, the mysterious vessel also accelerated, maintaining the distance. "Definitely following us," murmured Damien. "What do we do?" "Get to the port as quickly as possible and disappear into the crowd." The next 20 minutes were tense. Damien navigated the yacht through the heavy traffic of Halifax port, zigzagging between larger vessels, trying to lose whoever was following them. When they finally docked at a busy marina, Damien checked the radar again. The pursuing vessel had disappeared. "We lost them," he said, "at least for now." But as they descended from the boat with their minimal luggage, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that their escape was just beginning, and that whoever was hunting them would not give up easily. Halifax welcomed them with bright lights and urban noise, a city that promised anonymity, but also hid unknown dangers. As they walked through the streets toward the hotel where Damien had reserved rooms under false identities, Isabella looked over her shoulder once more. In the middle of the crowd, she swore she saw a familiar face, but when she looked again, the person had disappeared. "Paranoia," she murmured to herself. But deep down, she knew it wasn't paranoia. It was survival instinct, and that instinct was screaming that the worst was yet to come. The hotel that Damien had chosen in Halifax was in the Old Town district, among cobblestone streets and colonial buildings that vaguely reminded Isabella of St. Harbour. It was a discreet establishment, frequented mainly by backpacking tourists and regional merchants, the type of place where no one asked unnecessary questions. Isabella registered as Elena Morris, a temporary identity that Damien had obtained through his contacts. Their rooms were on the 3rd floor, overlooking the harbour, and although they were simple, they offered the privacy they needed to plan their next steps. "We'll stay here for 3 days," explained Damien as he checked the windows and possible escape routes from the room. "Enough time to get better passports and organize our trip to Switzerland." Isabella sat on the narrow bed, feeling the weight of exhaustion finally falling on her. In the last 48 hours, she had made the biggest decision of her life, fled from home, become a fugitive, sailed across the ocean, and arrived in a foreign country with a false identity. It was a lot to process. "Damien," she said, watching him methodically check every corner of the room, "have you always lived like this? Always paranoid, always looking over your shoulder?" He stopped what he was doing and sat beside her. "Not always, but since Lisa's death, yes. I learned that the world is more dangerous than it seems, especially for people like us." People like us. People who know too much. People who represent a threat to powerful men. Isabella took his hand. "Do you think I'll adapt to this life?" "I think you're stronger than you imagine." Damien kissed her fingers. "You abandoned everything you knew for love. That requires a courage that few possess." A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Damien immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the inside of his jacket, where Isabella now realized he carried a gun. "Were you expecting anyone?" she whispered. "No." Damien rose silently and approached the door. "Who is it?" "Room service," came a female voice with a Canadian accent. "We didn't order room service. It's complimentary from the house, sir. Champagne for the newlyweds." Damien and Isabella exchanged glances. No one should know they were there, much less that they were a couple. "Leave it at the door," said Damien. "We'll get it later. I need you to sign the receipt, sir." Damien drew his gun, checked the magazine, and positioned himself beside the door. He gestured for Isabella to hide in the bathroom. "You can come in," he said, unlocking the door. The door opened slowly and a young woman entered, pushing a cart with a bottle of champagne. But when she raised her head, Isabella caught her breath. It was Lisa Wayne, alive. "Hello, brother," she said calmly. "I missed you." Damien almost dropped his gun. His face turned white as paper, and for a moment Isabella thought he might faint. "Lisa," his voice was just a whisper. But you're dead. I saw your body. I was at your funeral." "You saw the body of a woman who looked like me, with documents identifying her as me." Lisa closed the door and leaned against it. "Faked death, brother. Only way to stay alive while investigating who really wanted to kill me." Isabella came out of the bathroom, still in shock. The woman before them was really identical to the photos she had seen in the investigation files, but 5 years older, dark brown hair, intelligent green eyes, a face that mixed sweetness and determination. 5 years, said Damien, his voice broken with emotion. 5 years I thought you were dead. 5 years I blamed myself for not protecting you. I know. And I'm sorry for that, but there was no other way. Lisa approached her brother. If they had known I was alive, they would have continued hunting. It was safer to let everyone think they were free of me. Everyone who? Asked Isabella. Who wanted to kill you? Lisa studied her for a moment. You must be Isabella Castleton, the woman for whom my brother is risking everything. How do you know about me? I know many things, including the fact that you didn't run away just for love. Lisa opened the champagne bottle and served 3 glasses. You ran because you discovered you're being hunted by the same men who tried to kill me. Damien still seemed in shock. Lisa, I don't understand. If you're alive, why didn't you contact me before? Because you were being watched. All your movements, all your calls, all your contacts were monitored. If I had appeared in your life, they would have discovered I was alive and killed me for real this time. And now? Why is it safe now? Because you ran, because you left their direct reach, and because I finally gathered enough evidence to finish them once and for all. Lisa sat in the room's only armchair and took a folder from inside the room service cart. For 5 years I worked underground, collecting evidence, following money trails, documenting crimes. I managed to infiltrate agents into various organizations, record compromising conversations, photograph confidential documents. And you discovered who's behind it all? Asked Isabella. I discovered a corruption network that goes far beyond what I originally imagined. Politicians, judges, businessmen, police officers, all working together to launder money from international drug trafficking. Damien finally seemed to recover from the initial shock. Who's leading? 3 men. A senator, a judge, and a businessman. They form what they call the triumvirate. They've been controlling the scheme for more than 15 years. Do we know any of them? Asked Isabella. Lisa looked her directly in the eyes. 2 you don't know, but the third, Isabella, the businessman, is Richard Davenport. The world seemed to stop around Isabella. Richard? My ex-fiancé? He's not just your ex-fiancé. He's directly responsible for the assassination attempt against me. And now he's hunting you too. But Richard is only 26, protested Isabella. How can he be involved in something that has lasted 15 years? Because he inherited the position from his father, who died 3 years ago. The Davenport family has been in the scheme from the beginning. Lisa opened the folder and showed photographs, documents, transcripts of conversations. Richard took over the operation when his father died, and he's been even more cruel and efficient. Damien studied the documents with growing attention. My God, Lisa, this is explosive. It's enough to bring down the entire state government, but it's also enough to put us in the crosshairs of very dangerous men. That's why you kept hidden, Isabella understood. Exactly. But now that you're involved, that Richard is moving heaven and earth to find you, I can no longer stay in the shadows. How did you know we would be here? Asked Damien. I have contacts everywhere, including with the person who provided your false identities. Lisa smiled. Don't worry, he's trustworthy, but I needed to reach you before others did. Others? Richard sent a team to Canada. They arrived this morning. They haven't discovered where you are yet, but it won't take long. Isabella felt her blood freeze. How did they track us so quickly? Richard has resources you can't imagine, contacts in Interpol, in South American governments, in international criminal organizations. So, what do we do? Asked Damien. We change plans. You're not going to Switzerland to look for my old files. You're going north. North? United States. I have a contact in the FBI who is willing to accept asylum for us in exchange for the evidence I've collected. Us? Damien looked at her with surprise. Now that I've exposed myself to save you, I can't hide anymore. We have to finish this together. Isabella absorbed the information, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. Lisa, there's something I don't understand. If Richard is behind all this, why did he want to marry me? What would he gain from that? Protection. Marrying a Castleton would give him unassailable social respectability. No one would suspect a son-in-law of the most traditional family in St. Harbor. And my father? Does he know anything? Lisa hesitated before answering. Your father isn't directly involved in the scheme. But, she paused, but he was used by Richard. How so? Richard manipulated situations to make your father believe Damien was dangerous, that you were at risk. He planted evidence, spread rumors, even provided some of the investigation reports your father has on Damien. Son of a bitch, murmured Damien. My father is innocent, then? Asked Isabella, hopeful. Of direct participation in the scheme, yes, but... Lisa looked at her with compassion. But he did things to protect the family that weren't exactly legal. Nothing related to drugs or murder, but tax evasion, bribing politicians to get contracts. Things that Richard discovered and used to manipulate him. Isabella felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her father wasn't the monster she had begun to fear, but he also wasn't the man of integrity she had always believed him to be. How many people know about this? Asked Damien. Few, but enough for Richard to have control over many influential families in Massachusetts. It's a blackmail network, Isabella understood. Exactly. Richard collects compromising information about everyone around him, then uses that information to maintain control and protect his illegal businesses. And with me? Did he have information about me? He had photographs of you with Damien. He knew about your relationship before you even discovered your own feelings. How? You had been followed for more than a year. Richard was documenting every meeting, every conversation, every look exchanged between you. The revelation made Isabella feel violated in a way she couldn't express. Why? Because he knew you would never truly love him. But he also knew that if he could get evidence of betrayal, he could use that to control you after the marriage. He planned to blackmail me during our own marriage. He planned to blackmail you and your family for the rest of your life. The marriage would be just the beginning. Damien stood up abruptly and began pacing the room. This explains a lot. The ease with which he got information about me, the speed with which he discovered our location. He has an entire organization working for him, confirmed Lisa. Private. Investigators, hackers, even people inside the police. And now, asked Isabella, how do we get to the United States without being detected? I have a plan, but it will be risky. Lisa explained that she had a contact at the port who could put them on a cargo ship bound for Miami. It would be a 2-week journey, but completely off the official radar. It's our best chance, she said. Richard is monitoring all airports, but there's no way to watch all cargo ships. And after we reach the United States, my FBI contact will put us in witness protection while we prepare the case. With the evidence I have, we can not only expose the scheme but also secure international arrest warrants. Does this mean we can never return to America? Asked Isabella. At least not until all those involved are in prison, and even then, it would be risky. The idea of never seeing her homeland again, her family, her town, was devastating, but Isabella understood there was no alternative. If they stayed, they would be killed. If they fled without exposing the truth, they would live as fugitives forever. When do we leave? Asked Damien. Tomorrow night. The ship sails at midnight. And until then we stay hidden. But there's one thing we need to do before leaving. What? We need to contact Carmen. Isabella looked at her surprised. How do you know about Carmen? Because she sought me out. 2 weeks ago, she contacted me through a classified ad I maintain in a local newspaper for emergencies. Carmen knows you're alive. She knew when she saw a photo of me in one of the investigations she was doing on her own. What investigations? After you fled, Carmen became suspicious of Richard's reaction. She started asking questions. Investigating the Davenport family, she discovered strange connections, suspicious financial movements. Carmen is investigating Richard on her own. Isabella felt panic. She's in danger. She is. And that's why we need to get her out of St. Harbor before Richard discovers what she's doing. How? She's coming here. Tonight. What do you mean? Lisa checked her watch. Carmen took a bus to Halifax yesterday evening. She should arrive in a few hours. My God, murmured Isabella, if someone discovers she fled, no one will discover for now. She asked for leave due to health problems. She has at least a week before her absence is noticed. And is she bringing important information? She's bringing something better than information. She's bringing physical evidence. What kind of evidence? Remember you mentioned that Lisa had hidden files in St. Harbor, said Damien. Yes. Carmen found one of them. The impact of the revelation made Isabella sit heavily on the bed. Where? In your parents' house. Lisa used to attend events at the Castleton mansion when she was young, before starting the investigation. She knew the house very well. And she hid documents in our house. In the basement, in a false wall behind your father's wine cellar. Isabella remembered the cellar, a place that was rarely visited except during major events. How did Carmen know where to look? Because she was there when Lisa hid the documents. Lisa trusted her, knew that Carmen had lost a son to drugs and hated the traffickers. Carmen was complicit in Lisa's investigation. She was one of the few people Lisa completely trusted. When I faked my death, Carmen was one of the only ones who knew the truth. The revelation changed everything Isabella thought she knew about her life in St. Harbor. Carmen, the housekeeper who had raised her like a daughter, was secretly working to expose a network of corruption and organized crime. What kind of documents did she hide? Asked Damien. Original financial records, recordings of conversations, photographs of secret meetings, material that definitively proves the involvement of each member of the triumvirate. And Carmen managed to recover everything? She did, but she also discovered something else, something that completely changed our understanding of the situation. What? Lisa looked directly at Isabella. Your mother knew everything. The world seemed to collapse around Isabella. My mother. Donna Castleton wasn't just being manipulated by Richard. She was actively working with him. That's not possible. My mother loves me. She would never do something that could hurt me. She loves you, but she's also been blackmailed for years. Blackmailed how? Your mother had an extramarital affair. 15 years ago. Richard discovered it and has been using it to control her ever since. Isabella felt nauseous. With whom? With Richard's father. The bomb exploded in Isabella's mind like a grenade. Her mother had betrayed her father with the man who was behind the criminal scheme. Richard knew this and used this information to control the entire family. My God, whispered Isabella. That's why she pressured me so much to marry him. It wasn't just about tradition. It was because he was forcing her. Exactly, and there's more. More? What could be worse than this? Lisa looked at her with compassion. Isabella, you need to sit down. I'm already sitting. You're pregnant. The silence that followed was absolute. Isabella felt as if she had stopped breathing, as if time had frozen. How? How do you know this? Carmen noticed the signs before you left. The morning sickness you attributed to nervousness, the increased emotional sensitivity, the subtle physical changes. Isabella instinctively placed her hand on her belly. But I was careful. No method is 100% effective, said Damien softly, especially when there's a lot of stress involved. How long? She asked, still in shock. Carmen estimates about 6 weeks. Isabella did the math mentally. 6 weeks ago was exactly when she and Damien met for the first time at the cottage. The baby is ours, said Damien, his voice full of awe and terror. At the same time, it's ours, confirmed Isabella, tears beginning to roll down her face. Damien knelt before her, placing his hands on her belly. We're going to have a child. We're going to have a child in the middle of an international escape, being hunted by criminals, without a country, without legal identity, said Isabella, between tears and hysterical laughter. We're going to have a child who will grow up free, corrected Damien. Free from the secrets, the lies, the manipulations that dominated our lives. Lisa watched them with a sad smile. Now do you understand why it's so important to go to the United States? It's not just about justice. It's about protecting this child. Does Richard know? Asked Isabella. Not yet, but when he finds out, he'll use this against you too. How? He'll claim the child is his. He'll say you ran away because you were pregnant with his child and afraid of the family's reaction. The malice of the possibility made Isabella sick. He would do that? He would do anything to discredit you and protect his business. Damien stood up, his expression fierce. Then we'll finish him before he has the chance. How? With the evidence Carmen is bringing, with Lisa's testimony, with the protection of the American government. We'll expose everything publicly in a way that Richard won't be able to control or manipulate. And my parents? Asked Isabella. They'll find out about my mother's betrayal, about the blackmail, about everything. Your parents will suffer, admitted Lisa, but they'll also be freed, especially your father, who has been manipulated for years without knowing. A knock on the door interrupted them. This time everyone tensed. Carmen, whispered Isabella. Lisa checked the watch. Earlier than expected. Damien positioned himself again with the gun, but this time Lisa stopped him. It's her. I recognize the knock. Lisa opened the door and there was Carmen, with a small suitcase and an expression of determination that Isabella had never seen before. The housekeeper, who had always seemed so docile and subservient, now had the air of a warrior. Miss Isabella, said Carmen, entering quickly and closing the door. Are you well? And the baby? You were sure? Asked Isabella. A mother, always. Nose girl. And when I saw you running every morning, trying to escape your own thoughts, I knew there was more than wedding nervousness happening. Carmen turned to Lisa. I brought everything you asked for. Including the hidden documents? Including, and a few more things I found snooping in Mr. August's office. What kind of things? Carmen opened the suitcase and took out several folders. Correspondence between Mrs. Donner and Richard, records of strange payments, even some recordings she made of his phone conversations. My mother was recording Richard. She was trying to protect herself, gathering evidence in case he decided to expose her publicly. Isabella felt a pang of pride mixed with sadness. Her mother wasn't just a passive victim. She was fighting back the only way she knew how. How long have you known about all this, Carmen? Asked Damien. For years. Since Miss Lisa approached me to investigate my son's death. We discovered he was killed because he witnessed a drug delivery organized by the Triumvirate's men. Your son was killed by them? Isabella felt tears in her eyes. He was. And since then I've dedicated my life to gathering evidence to destroy them. That's why you worked in our house for so long. For that, and because I truly love you like a daughter. Even knowing that one day I would have to choose between protecting you and avenging my son. And now? Now I can do both at the same time. Lisa checked the watch again. We have 12 hours before the ship departs. Let's use that time to review all the evidence, organize it in a way that the FBI can act immediately. And then? Then, we begin our new life, all of us. Carmen turned to Isabella. Girl, are you sure you want to do this? Leaving America may mean never coming back. I'm sure, Carmen. I can't raise my child in a place where men like Richard have the power to destroy innocent lives. Then let's destroy them first. And so, in a modest hotel room in Halifax, 4 people who had been victims of the same criminal scheme united to finally seek justice, not just for themselves but for all the other victims who didn't have the chance to fight back. The final phase of their journey was about to begin, and this time they weren't just fugitives seeking freedom. They were warriors marching to the final battle. The early morning in Halifax was silent when the 4 headed to the port. Carmen carried a suitcase with all the documents that could bring down the Triumvirate. Lisa carried communication equipment to maintain contact with the FBI. Damien carried a gun and enough money for emergencies, and Isabella held his hand firmly, instinctively protecting the belly where their child was growing. The cargo, ship Hope of the Sea, was docked at the farthest pier of the commercial port, a colossus of rusted steel that transported containers to Miami. The captain, a grey-haired man with suspicious eyes, waited for them on the gangway. "You're the special passengers?" he asked in Spanish. "We are," replied Lisa in the same language. "Miguel told us there would be discreet accommodations. Follow me, and don't make noise. The crew can't know you're on board." They were taken to a small compartment in the bottom of the ship, originally used for storage, but which had been adapted with bunks and a basic bathroom. It wasn't luxurious, but it offered the privacy and security they needed. 2 weeks to Miami," said the captain. "Food will be left at the door 3 times a day. Don't leave this compartment during the day. At night you can walk on the deck, but only after I give the signal." After the captain left, they settled into the cramped space. Damien checked possible escape routes, Lisa tested her communication equipment, Carmen meticulously organized the documents, and Isabella tried to control the morning sickness that had intensified with the ship's movement. "How are you feeling?" asked Damien, sitting beside her. "Nauseous, scared but determined." Isabella smiled weakly. "It's strange to think that our child will be born in America, far from everything we know." "It will be born free," said Carmen, looking up from the documents. "Free from the lies and corruption that have poisoned St. Harbor for generations." "Do you think we'll really be able to bring down Richard and the others?" asked Isabella. "With what we have here," said Lisa, tapping the evidence folder, "they won't be able to escape. It's 15 years of documented crimes, compromising recordings, financial transactions that prove money laundering. And my parents, what will happen to them?" "Your father will probably face some minor charges for tax evasion and bribery, but nothing that would result in prison," explained Lisa. "Your mother, her situation is more complicated. Could she be accused of complicity?" "She could. But we have evidence that she was being coerced. A good lawyer will get her a deal." The first day at sea passed slowly. They obsessively reviewed each document, organized the evidence in chronological order, prepared detailed statements. Lisa maintained regular contact with her FBI contact through a satellite phone, updating him on their location and progress. On the second night, as they walked on the deck under a starry sky, Damien pulled Isabella to a more secluded corner. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious. "What?" "When we reach the United States, when this whole situation is resolved, I want to marry you, officially, legally." Isabella felt tears burning her eyes. "Damien, I know our situation is complicated, that we're running away, that our life will be uncertain for a while, but I want our child to be born, knowing that his parents are committed to each other forever. Are you sure? Once all the truth comes out, you'll discover exactly what kind of family you're marrying into." "I already know what kind of family I'm marrying into. A family of brave people who fight for what's right, even when it's difficult." Damien took her face in his hands. Carmen risked her life to seek justice for her son. Lisa faked her own death to expose corruption. "You abandoned everything you knew to be with me. And even your mother, with all the mistakes she made, was trying to protect the family the only way she knew how." "And my father?" "Your father is a good man who was manipulated by bad people. When he knows the truth, I'm sure he'll support us." Isabella nestled in his arms, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in weeks. "Yes," she whispered. "I want to marry you. I want to build a family with you." They were interrupted by Lisa, who approached running from the compartment. "We have a problem," she said, breathless. "What kind of problem?" "I just received information from my FBI contact. Richard discovered we're on this ship." Isabella's blood froze. "How is that possible?" "He has informants in several North American ports. Someone saw us boarding." "What does that mean?" asked Damien. "It means he's sending a helicopter to intercept the ship before we reach international waters. Can we ask the captain to speed up?" "I already asked, but it won't be enough. They'll catch up to us in about 4 hours." Damien began to walk in circles, thinking quickly. "Do we have enough weapons to resist?" I have a pistol, you have another, but Richard is probably sending professional mercenaries. Then we need another plan." "What kind of plan?" asked Isabella. Lisa smiled, but there was no humor in her expression. "The kind of plan that will end this once and for all." "What do you mean?" "I mean that we're going to stop running and start attacking." Lisa explained that her FBI contact had organized a joint operation with Canadian and American authorities. If they could keep Richard occupied long enough, an interception operation could capture him in international waters. "How are we going to keep him occupied?" asked Carmen. "By offering him exactly what he wants." "Which is?" "Me," said Isabella. "He wants to take me back to the United States, to continue with the marriage farce. We'll let him think he succeeded." "Absolutely not," said Damien immediately. "I won't allow you to put yourself in danger, especially being pregnant." "Damien, listen to the plan before rejecting it," said Lisa. "We'll make Richard believe he's captured us. We'll surrender, let him take us to his helicopter. But during transport, the FBI and the American Coast Guard will intercept. And if it goes wrong? If it goes wrong, at least we tried. If we don't, try. Richard will hunt us for the rest of our lives." Damien looked at Isabella, seeing the determination in her eyes. "You want to do this?" "I want to end this, forever, so our child can grow up without fear." Reluctantly, Damien agreed to the plan. They spent the next 2 hours preparing, hiding the most important evidence in places Richard wouldn't think to look, and rehearsing exactly what they would say when he arrived. The sound of the helicopter came shortly before dawn. It was a military model, black and intimidating, which hovered over the ship like a vulture. Ropes were thrown from the helicopter, and several armed men quickly descended to the deck. Richard Davenport was the last to descend. Even from a distance, Isabella could see the cruel satisfaction on his face when he spotted her. "Isabella, my dear fiancée," he shouted over the noise of the helicopter. "How good to find you. We were all very worried." "Richard," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "how did you find us?" "I have resources you can't imagine." Richard approached, flanked by 4 armed mercenaries. "Now, let's go back home, as a happy family." "She's not going anywhere with you," said Damien, stepping forward. "Ah, the famous Damian Wayne, the man who kidnapped my fiancée." Richard smiled coldly. "You'll have the pleasure of explaining your actions to the American authorities." "I didn't kidnap anyone. Isabella came with me of her own free will." "Of course she did, after you drugged and manipulated her." Isabella saw where Richard was leading the conversation. He was creating a narrative that would paint her as a victim, not as a voluntary fugitive. "Richard," she said, stepping forward, "stop this farce. We both know the truth." "The truth?" Richard laughed. "The truth is that you were seduced by a criminal and convinced to abandon your family. But don't worry, dear. I'll forgive everything. We can still have our perfect wedding." "I would never marry you, especially now that I know who you really are." Richard's smile became dangerous. "And who am I?" "A murderer, a drug trafficker, a man who kills innocent people to protect your dirty business. You have no way to prove any of that." "Don't I?" Isabella looked at Lisa, who stepped forward. "Hello, Richard," said Lisa calmly. "I've missed you." Richard's face turned white as paper. For a moment, he seemed to be seeing a ghost, because, from his perspective, he was. "Lisa Wayne," he whispered. But you're dead. Fake death. You should have checked the body better before celebrating." "This is impossible. I personally organized your assassination." "And there's the confession," said Lisa, smiling. "Recorded and transmitted live to the American authorities." Richard looked around, finally realizing he had fallen into a trap. You lured me here on purpose." "We lured you into international waters, where you can be arrested for international crimes," said Damien. As if responding to a signal, several American Coast Guard boats appeared on the horizon, rapidly approaching the cargo ship. "Mercenaries!" shouted Richard. "Kill them all!" But his men hesitated when they saw the military vessels approaching. They had been hired for a simple kidnapping, not for a confrontation with international naval forces. "I didn't sign up for this," said one of the mercenaries, lowering his weapon. Neither did I, said another. In a matter of minutes all the mercenaries had surrendered. Richard stood alone on the deck, surrounded by evidence of his crimes and with no escape route. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "I have contacts in all North American governments. I can make you disappear with one phone call." "Your contacts won't be able to help you where you're going," said Lisa. "American federal prison, charged with international drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder." The Coast Guard arrived and took control of the situation. Richard and his mercenaries were arrested and taken to one of the military vessels. Isabella, Damien, Lisa, and Carmen were escorted to another ship, where they were greeted by Special Agent Martinez from the FBI. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Martinez, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. You've just helped bring down one of the largest organized crime networks in North America." "And now?" asked Isabella. "Now you enter the Witness Protection Program while we prepare the case. With the evidence you've provided, we expect not only to convict Richard and his associates, but also to dismantle the entire network." "How long will it take?" asked Damien. "The main case should go to trial in about 6 months, but with the evidence you have, it will be practically impossible for them to escape conviction." During the journey to Miami, Isabella and Damien watched the American news on a tablet provided by the FBI. Richard's arrest had caused a political earthquake. In Massachusetts, politicians were resigning, businessmen were arrested, judges were removed. The scandal dominated all the headlines. "Your father issued a statement," said Martinez, showing them an article. "He's fully cooperating with the investigations and publicly apologized for any inadvertent involvement with criminals." Isabella read August's statement, feeling a mixture of sadness and pride. Her father was doing the right thing, even knowing it could cost him his reputation and fortune. "And my mother. Your mother is also cooperating. Her lawyers negotiated immunity in exchange for her complete testimony against Richard. Is she well?" "Physically, yes. Emotionally, it will be a long recovery process." 3 days later, they arrived in Miami. They were taken to a safe house in a quiet suburb, where they would spend the next few months preparing their testimonies. The house was comfortable, with 4 bedrooms, a small garden, and discreet but effective protection. For Isabella, after weeks of running and hiding, having a safe place to call home was an inestimable luxury. "What do you think?" asked Martinez, showing them around. "It's perfect," said Isabella, instinctively placing her hand on her belly, which was already beginning to show a small curve. "When is the baby?" asked Martinez. "About 7 months from now," replied Damien, putting his arm around Isabella. "Then you'll have enough time to settle before the little one arrives." Over the following weeks, they adapted to their new life. Damien studied English intensively, determined to rebuild his career in the United States. Lisa worked with federal prosecutors, detailing every aspect of the investigation she had conducted for 5 years. Carmen cared for Isabella as she always had, but now with the knowledge that she was protecting not just a young woman, but also the next generation. And Isabella flourished. Away from the constant pressure and suffocating expectations of St. Harbor, she discovered parts of herself she had never known. She began to study child psychology, thinking of working with traumatized children. She learned to cook Brazilian dishes to cure homesickness, and mainly, she allowed herself to dream of the future for the first time in her life. "How do you want the wedding to be?" asked Damien one night as they walked through the garden. "Simple, just us, Lisa and Carmen, maybe on the beach at sunset. No elaborate wedding dress? No hundreds of guests? Nothing that reminds me of the circus my parents wanted to organize." Isabella smiled. "I want something real, something ours." "And the baby? Have you thought of names?" "If it's a girl, I want to call her Hope, like the ship that brought us to freedom. And if it's a boy? Gabriel, angel of the Annunciation, because he represents the beginning of a new life for us." They married in a small ceremony on Key Biscayne Beach 2 weeks before the trial began. Isabella wore a simple white dress that highlighted her 4-month pregnancy belly. Damien was elegant in a light suit, and both had genuine smiles they hadn't shown for months. Carmen cried throughout the ceremony, remembering how she had cared for Isabella since she was a baby and seeing her now become a wife and future mother. Lisa served as maid of honor, carrying the rings that Damien had bought with the last money he had brought from the United States. "You, Damien and Isabella, have chosen each other freely," said the justice of the peace. "You chose love over convenience, truth over lies, courage over safety. May that choice continue to guide you throughout all the days of your lives." When they kissed to seal the union, both knew it wasn't just a marriage. It was a declaration of independence from everything that had tried to control them, from all the expectations others had placed on them. Richard's trial and his associates was a spectacle that dominated international headlines. For 3 weeks, Isabella, Damien, Lisa, and Carmen testified about the crimes they had witnessed and documented. Richard tried all possible legal resources. He claimed that Isabella had been manipulated, that Lisa was lying to avenge herself, that Damien was the real criminal. But the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, documents, financial transactions, multiple witnesses, everything pointed to his guilt. When the verdict was read, guilty on all charges, Isabella felt as if a part of her past had finally been buried. Richard was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "How do you feel?" asked Damien when they left the courthouse. "Free," she answered simply. "For the first time in my life, completely free." 6 months later, Hope Wayne was born in a Miami hospital, crying loudly and healthy. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, but mainly she had the future open before her. "She's perfect," whispered Isabella, holding her daughter in her arms. "Just like her mother," said Damien, kissing them both. Carmen, who had officially become the child's adoptive grandmother, cried with happiness. "My granddaughter will grow up without fear, without lies, without bad men wanting to hurt her." "Our granddaughter," corrected Lisa, who had also instantly fallen in love with the baby. "And she will know the story of how we all fought to give her this freedom." 2 years later, they received an unexpected letter. It was from August Castleton. "My dear daughter," the letter began, "I don't know if you can forgive me for the mistakes I made, for the way I allowed others to control our family. But I want you to know that I am grateful every day for the courage you showed. You saved us from living a lie for the rest of our lives." The letter continued explaining that he and Donna had separated amicably. August was rebuilding his business ethically, and Donna was in therapy, trying to process the years of blackmail and manipulation she had suffered. "They want to meet their granddaughter," said Damien after reading the letter. "Do you think it's safe?" asked Isabella. "I think it's time we started rebuilding bridges. Hope deserves to know her grandparents, but not in the United States, not yet. No, they can come here. If they really want to meet our daughter, they'll make the effort." 6 months later, August and Donna arrived in Miami. The reunion was tense at first, full of tears and requests for forgiveness. But when Hope, now a curious 2.5-year-old child, extended her little arms to her grandparents, all the hurts seemed to melt away. "She has your eyes, Isabella," said Donna, holding her granddaughter reverently. "And her father's stubbornness," added August, smiling as Hope tried to pull off his glasses. "Dad," said Isabella during a walk on the beach, "do you forgive me for running away the way I did? Daughter, do you forgive me for almost handing you over to a monster?" They embraced on the sand, under the same sun that had witnessed so many transformations in their lives. 5 years after, fleeing St. Harbor, Damien and Isabella had built a full life in Miami. He had opened an international consulting firm, helping honest Brazilian companies establish themselves in the United States. She had graduated in psychology and worked with refugee children, using her own escape experience to help other families. Lisa had written a book about her investigation, which became a bestseller and was adapted into a film. She used the royalties to finance a foundation that helped investigative journalists in dangerous countries. Carmen had officially adopted the Wayne surname and was the most dedicated grandmother any child could wish for. Hope called her Grandma Carmen and firmly believed she could perform any culinary magic. "Have you ever regretted it?" asked Damien one night as they watched Hope play in the garden. "Running away with you? Never." Isabella snuggled in his arms. "It was the best decision I ever made. Even knowing everything we would have to face? Especially knowing that, because it showed me what kind of man you really are, someone who fights for what he loves, who protects the innocent, who never gives up. And you showed me what kind of woman I wanted by my side forever, someone brave enough to bet everything on love." They kissed as the sun set over Biscayne Bay, the same bay that had welcomed them as fugitives and now sheltered them as a happy family. Hope ran to them, interrupting the romantic moment with the typical enthusiasm of a 5-year-old child. "Daddy, Mommy, look what I found." She showed a pink shell she had found in the sand. "It's beautiful, my princess," said Damien, lifting her in his arms. "Grandma Carmen said that if I listen very quietly, I can hear the sea inside it." Isabella smiled, remembering how she herself had believed in the same magic as a child. "And can you hear it?" Hope put the shell to her ear, concentrating intensely. "I can? And do you know what the sea is saying?" "What?" "It's saying our family is happy forever." Damien and Isabella laughed, but both knew that childish wisdom sometimes captured deep truths that adults missed. They were happy. They had faced terrible storms, but emerged from the other side stronger, more united, more grateful for each day they had together. At night, after putting Hope to bed, they sat on the porch, watching the stars. It was a ritual they had developed, these moments of quietness where they could simply exist together, without running from anything, without hiding from anyone. "What are you thinking about?" asked Damien. "About how our story could have been different if I had chosen safety instead of love. And I'm grateful every day for having been brave enough to choose you, to choose us, even though it meant leaving everything behind. Damien, when I left St. Harbor, I thought I was losing everything, but in fact, it was when I began to find everything that really mattered." They sat in comfortable silence, savoring the peace they had conquered. Far away, Richard would rot in prison for the rest of his life. The corruption network that had poisoned Massachusetts for decades was destroyed, and a new generation, represented by little Hope, would grow up free from the secrets and lies that had defined the past. "Damien," said Isabella softly. Thank you." "For what?" "For having loved me enough to fight for us, for having been patient when I was afraid, for having shown me that true love is worth any risk. Thank you for having trusted me when everyone said you shouldn't, for having chosen our love when it would have been much easier to choose convenience." The guys kissed under the Miami stars, two people who had found in each other not just love but freedom. And somewhere in the universe, the same stars that shone over them also shone over St. Harbor, where a new generation of children would grow up in a slightly more honest world thanks to their courage. The story that had begun with an 18-year-old girl fleeing an arranged marriage had transformed into something much larger. A family built on true love, conquered justice, and deserved freedom. And in the end, as in all the best love stories, they lived happily ever after. Not because they didn't face difficulties, but because they faced all of them together.